No, I am not muted. Hello. Hello. What a rather lovely number of followers. 1,444. I'll take a little picture of that. There we go. You were distracted by gaming. Good. You were playing yourself? Or were you watching someone else play? Hello, Magusa. As you can see, I've rearranged things a little bit. I'm on time. Well done, Jade. You cozy corner. I've literally just moved couches because the other one was eugenics. Hello, Summer's nothing but lurking monster heart. Bubonic. Uh, yeah, quite unusually. Hello, Bublina. Luigi. Oh, Kermit. Kermit 985. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Nilanya 1. Hello, Kermit. Nyarla Thotepkat. Hello. I'm going to turn the volume down on my phone. Somebody in my history WhatsApp group posting something. You look I am tired. I am tired. I'm not going to lie. Because I get up in the morning and I've had a busy day and I've been to the gym and I've been all over the place and it's just, you know, I would have loved a nap today. I just didn't have any time. You had some fun with Vigo. Yeah, he's such a cute little dog. I will sleep, Bublina. I'm in the same room. I've just moved couch. The round one is just over here, but the problem is it's so cozy that I decided to sit on something that is a little less cozy to try and not fall asleep. It's lashing down with rain. I hope my little plants outside are going to be okay. Not as cute as Mango. It's close. A boomer without his nap, that's a tragedy. I'll tell you something, my grandparents nap every day. And Grandpa lived to a ripe old age, and Grandma's still rocking on. There's a lot to be said. Hot Tea and Thunder sounds like a band. Sounds like a song. Um, yeah, hot tea, cool tea, and cold wine. Grammy's still alive, yeah. 90. 90. 20 minutes after lunch, exactly. They say that you're supposed to walk after lunch. My grandparents have always had a nap. What's that about? Oh, bless. Yeah, but that's sometimes how it goes, Jake. Uh, my grandma was young, my mum was young. Mango. Mango. Vigo, by the way, is not a Yorkie. Vigo is a cute little short-haired, um, smooth-haired dachshund. Exercise is bad. Oh no, 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 no. They always did. They were very active every day. Um, yeah, I will go visit Nilanya. Worth it. Everyone take a nap right now. No, Bublina, not right now. Smooth, like real smooth. Oh god, like there's puppy smooth, you know. You're supposed to nap after dinner. What, before you go to bed? Dadzig perfume when? Don't ask me. There isn't even a Henry perfume, so it's Luke's dog. Yeah, I had brunch with Luke today. 200-pound English Mastiff, and I bet he's lazy as. one smooth Dackel canal, one smooth books and knives. I had to lean forward because this dark blue is really hard to read. He's a smooth hot dog. Wow. Alles für den Dackel. Exactly, Lily Moosh. How is it going, guys? Very good, Sammy Green. Okay, fair enough. Nap all day, live forever. Yeah, what would it be like though? What would Radzig perfume be like? Smoky? What would be the main notes of a Radzig? Shushan every time. Um, Alles für den Club, genau. Say happy birthday. Oh, is it happy birthday, Alison? Congratulations. Uh, what is that okra thing we're cooking? Well, okay, there's too many things now. Dogs go. Okay. It's your birthday. Cool. What are you doing today, or have you got plans at the weekend? Nice meal. A couple of bottles of vino. Going out somewhere. I can't read that out loud, Bubblina. Stop it. Oh my word. Oh, called in sick and blazing about the house today. Haha. Good stuff. Love it. Oh dear me. Yeah, please never change. Mark and I were talking about you today, Bubblina, saying how freaking funny you are. I hope you realize how funny you are. And if you're not writing, you should be writing. That's what Mark and I were saying today. Um, the Ziggling, of course, Xana Green. Uh, anyway, account arguments and that. Okay. Uh, no femzig ig. Um, when I'm going to show off my trombone skills, I don't really have any trombone skills. I can, I can, I can harp a little bit through it. A dart. Femzig, which is such a beast. What would that? No, but seriously, apart from the very musky tones of a Radzig perfume, what else would be in there? Um, I think it's got to be a little bit musky. No Logan allowed. A treehouse, yeah. Hot iron and woods. Okay, I see. Yeah, smoke exactly. Not too smoky though. I don't like that. Something little bit of herb essences going on there. It is now better to read. All right, we're gonna get to reading, are we? Oak with metallic silver. Okay. Evening over on Five and Frank. You just missed all the action. Uh, Ziggler goat tomorrow. Oh yeah, we're doing that tomorrow morning. Something that smells like robbery and war. Robber Baron, sandalwood, probably. Personally, I like the citrus scents when it comes to it. You're getting up at 4 a.m. for the goat stream. Now, that is some dedication with a 98. Yeah, I'm turning this mic up a little bit. How's that? Is that still okay? It's what the people want. Bless us with the fence fan and sensing outbreak, I beg you. Yeah, sure. More artwork for Dadzig, for Radzig. I'd love it. I get a bit jelly with all that stuff that Logan gets. Oh, I usually get up at 5 anyway to feed the horses. Wowsies. Okay, fair enough. Oh, I've got no idea what Hudson Williams' outfit was I don't really do Met Gala. I'll be honest with you. What kind of soup though? Back to the soup. It's a Bosnian soup. It's just chicken soup with different vegetables in it. What's going on with his hair? Um, it's basically a chicken soup. Just making a quick chicken broth with chicken thighs and drumsticks, and then adding in okra at the end. Okra's got this slimy quality. Uh, you had Met Gala content fed to me against you. Well, I feel you, Razzie, angry. No offense, Jade, just not my thing. Um, I don't follow the Met Gala. No, I don't. Radzig fell down the stairs with style, deliberately in his brigandine, which was padded on the back so he wouldn't hurt himself. And then he sprung up at the bottom, whipped out his sword. That's what she said, and kind of landed in this absolutely glorious Uberhau. Um, there it is. Whip it. Bubbling in the soup. Okra. If you can't find it, which might be a bit tricky, I don't know. Um, you might find it frozen if you're really inclined to do it. If not, it tastes like green beans, and if you want a little bit of that quality for the thickness, just peel some aubergine and cut it into small slices and whack that in. So there it is. You have Twitter. Um, yeah, I know it's a very it's because it's an African. Well, it's Turkish. That's why it's in the Bosnian soup. To be fair, it's in the Bosnian soup because of the Turkish influence. Um, yeah, it's quite nice. I mean, if they're fresh, it's not such a problem. If they're rehydrating it, but anyway, I'll link a recipe and you can I'll link a recipe sooner than later. Um, and they're steamed. They're very tasty and they're very healthy as well. Indian food, yeah. You can grow it here. It grows here. It's not that fussy actually. It's just not used that often. Yeah, curried okra. Oh, that's really good actually. If you find a curry place that does okra, um, yes, you could maybe find it. I didn't know they dry it, but I guess you can find it dried as well. Oh no, yeah, but you're in Germany. There'll be others around. I know you're kind of out in the sticks a little bit. Juniper berry oil, angelica, lemon peel, pepperwood. Yes, yes, yes. That sounds very good. I like all of those. Not so sure about the vanilla though, but oh, Summers. Remind me where you are, Summers. Some users instant like a tasty vanilla. Boston. Yeah, lucky you. Big metropolis like Boston. Yeah, not so far from each other then, are you? Okra is super good. If Yeah, it's better. It's better in a dish like a curry because then it's not so slimy. But all the same, I quite like it. Where are we at? 20 past 9. We should probably think about having a little read, shouldn't we? And I believe last week did we not skip a couple because they were too long? Would you have a cook-off with Mark one day? You'd have to ask Mark that. Just saying. I made him lunch today. Um, do we know what? Should I say what we had for lunch? Well, I asked Mark to pick up some lovely ham from the bone, and so it was ham cut off the bone. I made a hollandaise sauce, boiled some potatoes, and pan fried braised leek, and I had some endive left over from last week's soup. I chopped one of those in half, and again browned them up, a little butter, some water in there, and and then we had those with a lamb's leaf lettuce and garlic sprout salad, which was lightly dressed with olive oil and balsamico. And then because I had egg whites left over from the hollandaise sauce, I made an egg white red onion omelette, which I put the ham inside. And he brought some of those szkwarki pletene, platki, which is like these pork crackling biscuits, basically. And we had those. Hollandaise sauce is so damn easy. Don't even. My friend showed me how to make how to make it recently. They're all so easy if you've got a stab mix, basically. Cat sitting rats on there named Holly and eggs Benedict Benny. Really, that's so funny. Um, Shut the front door. Look, it's so easy. I'll tell you what you do. You melt 1/3 of a cup of butter, right? That was, I'd like, I don't know, what is it? 250 divided by 3, 8, 16, 24. Like 80 grams of butter melted, 3 egg yolks, a teaspoon of mustard, crack of salt, right? A little bit of pepper, some cayenne, and stab mix. Do that. And then you slowly drizzle the melted butter over it. Hollandaise sauce. Done. 2 minutes. Ridiculous. And it's everyone's like, oh, hollandaise sauce. Yeah, exactly. It's how you do it in the restaurant, and you do the same thing with mayonnaise, but you need to make sure that the egg yolk sits under the stab mix and the oil goes on top, so that you slowly pull it up. Otherwise, it kind of congeals. Of course, I make the noises while cooking. You don't like hollandaise? That's fine. Don't have to make a béarnaise. Bit more tricky that one, but anyway. Your bastards are hungry. How many bastards does Dadzig have? That's a good question. I will cook a feast for you one day. I plan to. Um, I thought about cooking at Olomouc, but it was all a bit too much. Now, let's have a look. Um, we read Scandal in Bohemia. Um, well, definitely there will be a cover charge, because with the food prices these days, um, just add an ice cube for the hollandaise, Luigi, or any of them. Yeah, it was. There was no room to cook, but they fed us. They did feed us good. Improv cooking show when, as in improvise the cooking or cooking improvising while cooking. I prefer Frankfurter green sauce, especially with asparagus. What is a Frankfurter green sauce? I was made with herbs. Any emulsion sauce. Thanks for the trick, Luigi. Good to know. Um, oh, it's with herbs, isn't it? Iron Chef improv cooking. That's how I learned to cook, guys. Many different herbs. I love it. That's how I learned to cook is improvising. A case of identity. Did we read a case of identity yet? I know we're just down this cooking theme now. We're gonna do jazz cooking. Not yet. Last we read the Red-Headed League and the Baboon one. Now, hang on now. Case of identity. Oh no, we did read that one. This is about the young woman who comes with the stepfather. Uh, Hang on a second now. Yeah, I think we did read that one. It's the one where the stepfather tries to trick the stepdaughter into marrying someone who's not who's not really into her, so that he can keep the inheritance. Oh, sauce, sauce! Thank you very much indeed. I've broken and saved many. Oh, oh my god, speckled band. Yep. So should keep track of this, guys. So we have read Scandal in Bohemia, Case of Identity, Red-Headed League, and the Speckled Band. So we're on to the Boscombe Valley mystery. Boscombe Valley mystery, and then I really do need to pick up my book from the bookshop because it is ready. Roast beef or fondue. All right, gang. A whoopie pie. Is that anything to do with Whoopi Goldberg? Yes, Valeria. Reading time. You've been sat patiently, have you? Yeah. Let me see if I can move this a little closer. Vanilla frosting inside. Are we ready to begin? The Boscombe Valley Mystery. We were seated at breakfast one morning, my wife and I, when the maid brought in a telegram. It was from Sherlock Holmes and ran in this way: Have you a couple of days to spare? Have just been wired four from the west of England in connection with Boscombe Valley tragedy. Shall be glad if you'll come with me. Air and scenery perfect. Leave Paddington by the 11:15. What do you say, dear? Said my wife, looking across at me. Will you go? Well, I really don't know what to say. I have a fairly long list at present. Oh, Anne Struther would do your work for you. You've been looking a little pale lately. I think the change would do you good. And you're always so interested in Mr. Sherlock Holmes's cases. I should be ungrateful if I were not seeing what I gained through one of them, I answered. But if I am to go, I must pack at once, for I have only half an hour. My experience of camp life in Afghanistan had at least had the effect of making me a prompt and ready traveller. My wants were few and simple, so that in less than the time stated I was in a cab with my valise, rattling away to Paddington Station. Sherlock Holmes was pacing up and down the platform, his tall, gaunt figure even gaunter and taller by his long grey travelling cloak and close-fitting cloth cap. "It really is very good of you to come, Watson," said he. "It makes a considerable difference to me having someone with whom I can be thoroughly rely upon. Local aid is always either worthless or else biased. If you will keep the two corner seats, I shall get the tickets." We had the carriage to ourselves, save for an immense litter of papers which Holmes had brought with him. Among these he rummaged and read, with intervals of note-taking and meditation, until we were past Reading. Then he suddenly rolled them all into a gigantic ball and tossed them up onto the rack. "Have you ever heard anything of the case?" he asked. "Well, not a word. I have not seen a paper for some days." "Well, the London presses had not very full accounts. I have just been looking through all the recent papers in order to master the particulars. It seems, from what I can gather, to be one of those simple cases which are so extremely difficult." "Well, that sounds a little paradoxical, but it is profoundly true. Singularity is almost invariably a clue. The more featureless and commonplace a crime is, the more difficult it is to bring it home. In this case, however, they have established a very serious case against the son of the murdered man." "It is a murder, then?" "Well, it is conjectured to be so. I shall take nothing for granted until I have the opportunity of looking personally into it. I will explain the state of things to you, as far as I've been able to understand it, in a very few words. Boscombe Valley is a country district not very far from Ross in Herefordshire. The largest landed proprietor in that part is a Mr. John Turner, who made his money in Australia and returned some years ago to the old country. One of the farms which he held, that of Hatherley, was let to Mr. Charles McCarthy, who was also an ex-Australian, The men had known each other in the colonies, so that it was not unnatural that when they came to settle down they should do so as near to each other as possible. Turner was apparently the richer man, so McCarthy became his tenant, but still remained, it seems, upon terms of perfect equality, as they were frequently together. McCarthy had one son, a lad of 18, and Turner had only a daughter of the same age, but neither of them had wives living. They appear to have avoided the society of the neighbouring English families and to have led retired lives, though both McCarthy was fond of sport and were frequently seen at the race meetings of the neighbourhood. McCarthy kept two servants, a man and a girl. Turner had a considerable household, some half dozen at the least. That is as much as I've been able to gather about the families. Now for the facts. On June 3rd, that is on Monday last, McCarthy left his house at Hatherley about 3 in the afternoon and walked down to Boscombe Pool, which is a small lake formed by the spreading out of the stream which runs down the Boscombe Valley. He'd been out with his serving man in the morning at Ross, and he had told the man that he must hurry as he had an appointment of importance to keep at 3. From that appointment, he never came back alive. From Hatherley Farmhouse to Boscombe Pool is a quarter of a mile, and two people saw him as he passed over this ground. One was an old woman, whose name is not mentioned, and the other was William Crowder, a gamekeeper in the employ of Mr. Turner. Both these witnesses depose that Mr. McCarthy was walking alone. The gamekeeper adds that within a few minutes of his seeing Mr. McCarthy pass, he had seen his son, Mr. James McCarthy, going the same way with a gun under his arm. To the best of his belief, the father was actually in sight at the time when the son was following him. He thought no more of the matter until he heard in the evening of the tragedy that had occurred. The two McCarthys were seen after the time when William Chowder, the gamekeeper, lost sight of them. The Boscombe Pool is a thickly wooded round with just a fringe of grass and of reeds around the edge. A girl of 14, Patience Moran, who is the daughter of the lodge keeper at the Boscombe Valley estate, was in one of the woods picking flowers. She states that while she was there, she saw at the border of the wood and close by the lake Mr. McCarthy and his son, and that they appeared to be having a violent quarrel. She heard Mr. McCarthy the elder using very strong language to his son, and saw the latter raise up his hand as if to strike his father. She was so frightened by their violence that she ran away and told her mother when she reached home that she had left the two McCarthys quarrelling near Boscombe Pool, and that she was afraid that they were going to fight. She had hardly said the words when young Mr. McCarthy came running up to the lodge to say that he had found his father dead in the wood, and to ask for the help of the lodge keeper. He was much excited, without either his gun or his hat, and his right hand and sleeve were observed to be stained with fresh blood. On following him, they found the dead body of his father stretched out upon the grass beside the pool. The head had been beaten in by repeated blows of some heavy and blunt weapon. The injuries were such as might very well have been inflicted by the butt end of his son's gun, which was found lying on the grass within a few paces of the body. Under these circumstances, the young man was instantly arrested, and a verdict of wilful murder having been returned at the inquest on Tuesday, he was on Wednesday brought before the magistrate at Ross, who have referred the case to the next assizes. Those are the main facts of the case as they came out before the coroner and at the police court. "Why, I could hardly imagine a more damning case," I remarked. "If ever circumstantial evidence pointed to a criminal, it does so here." "Circumstantial evidence is a very tricky thing," answered Holmes thoughtfully. "It may seem to point very straight to one thing, but if you shift your viewpoint of a view a little, you may find it pointing in an equally uncompromising manner to something entirely different. It must be confessed, however, that the case looks exceedingly grave against the young man, and it is very possible that he is indeed the culprit. There are several people in the neighbourhood, however, and among them Miss Turner, the daughter of the neighbouring landowner, who believe in his innocence, and who have retained Lestrade, whom you may remember in connection with the study in Scarlet, to work out the case in his interest. Lestrade, being rather puzzled, has referred the case to me, and hence it is the two middle-aged gentlemen are flying westward at 50 miles an hour instead of quietly digesting their breakfast at home. "I am afraid," said I, "that the facts are so obvious that you will find little credit to be gained out of this case." "There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact," he answered, laughing. Besides, we may chance to hit upon some other obvious facts which may have been seen by no means obvious to Mr. Lestrade. You know me too well to think that I am boasting when I say that I shall either confirm or destroy his theory by means which he is quite incapable of employing or even of understanding. To take the first example to hand, I very clearly perceive that in your bedroom the window is open to the right-hand side, and yet I question whether Lestrade would have noted even so self-evident a thing as that. How on earth, my dear fellow, I know you well. I know the military neatness which characterizes you. You shave every morning, and in this season you shave by the sunlight. But since your shaving is less and less complete as we get further back on the left side, until it becomes positively slovenly as we get around the angle of the jaw, it is surely clear, very clear, that side is less well illuminated than the other. I could not imagine a man of your habits looking at himself in an equal light and being satisfied with such a result. I only quote this as a trivial example of observation and inference. Therein lies my métier, and it is just possible that it may be of some service in the investigation which lies before us. There are one or two minor points which were brought out in the inquest and which are worth considering. Well, what are they? Well, it appears that his arrest did not take place at once, but after the return to Hatherley Farm. On the inspector of constabulary informing him that he was a prisoner, he remarked that he was not surprised to hear it, and that it was no more than his deserts. This observation of his had the natural effect of removing any traces of doubt which might have remained in the minds of the coroner's jury. Well, it was a confession, I ejaculated. No, for it was followed by a protestation of innocence. Well, coming on top of such a damning series of events, it was at least a most suspicious remark. Not on the contrary, said Holmes. It is the brightest rift which I can which I can at present see in the clouds. However innocent he might be, he could not be such an absolute imbecile as not to see that the circumstances were very black against him. Had he appeared surprised at his own arrest, or feigned indignation at it, I should have looked upon it as highly suspicious, because such surprise or anger would not be natural under the circumstances, and yet might appear to be the best policy to a scheming man. His frank acceptance of the situation marks him as either an innocent man or as a man of considerable self restraint and firmness. As to his remark about his deserts, it was also not unnatural if considered that he stood by the dead body of his father, and that there is no doubt that he had that very day so far forgotten his filial duty as to bandy words with him, and even according to the little girl whose evidence is so important, to raise his hand as if to strike him. The self-reproach and contrition which are displayed in his remark appeared to me, to be the signs of a healthy mind, rather than of a guilty one. I shook my head. Many men have hanged on far slighter evidence, I remarked. And so they have, and many men have been wrongfully hanged. What is the young man's own account of the matter? It is, I'm afraid, not very encouraging to his supporters, though there are one or two points in it which are suggestive. You will find it here, and may read it for yourself. I miss Bosom too. He picked up from his bundle a copy of the local Herefordshire paper, and having turned down the sheet, he pointed out the paragraph in which the unfortunate young man had given his own statement of what had occurred. I settled myself down in the corner of the carriage and read it very carefully. It ran in this way: Mr. James McCarthy, the only son of the deceased, was then called and gave evidence as follows. I'd been away from home for 3 days at Bristol, and had only just returned upon the morning of last Monday the 3rd. My father was absent from home at the time of my arrival, and I was informed by the maid that he had driven over to Ross with John Cobb, the groom. Shortly after my return, I heard the wheels of his trap in the yard, and looking out my window, I saw him get out and walk rapidly out of the yard, though I was not aware in which direction he was going. I then took off my gun and strolled out in the direction of the Boscombe Pool with the intention of visiting the rabbit warren which is upon the other side. On my way, I saw William Crowder, the gamekeeper, as he has stated in his evidence, but he is mistaken in thinking that I was following my father. I had no idea that he was in front of me. When, about 100 yards from the pool, I heard a cry of cooey, which was a usual signal between my father and myself. I then hurried forward and found him standing by the pool. He appeared to be much surprised at seeing me and asked me rather roughly what I was doing there. A conversation ensued, which led to high words and almost to blows, for my father was a man of a very violent temper. Seeing that his passion was becoming ungovernable, I left him and returned towards Hatherley Farm. I had not gone more than 150 yards, however, when I heard a hideous outcry behind me, which caused me to run back again. I found my father expiring on the ground with his head terribly injured. I dropped my gun and held it in my arms, but he almost instantly expired. I knelt beside him for some minutes, and then made my way to Mr. Turner's lodge keeper, his house being the nearest, to ask for assistance. I saw no one near my father when I returned, and I've no idea how he came by his injuries. He was not a popular man, being somewhat cold and forbidding in his manner, but he had, as far as I know, no active enemies. I know nothing further of the matter. The coroner. Did your father make any statement to you before he died? Witness. He mumbled a few words, but I could only catch some allusion to a rat. The coroner. What did you understand by that? Witness. It conveyed no meaning to me. I thought that he was delirious. The coroner. What was the point upon which you and your father had his final quarrel? Witness. I should prefer not to answer. The coroner. I'm afraid that I must press it. Witness. It is really impossible for me to tell you. I can assure you that it has nothing to do with the sad tragedy which followed. The coroner. That is for the court to decide. I need not point out to you that your refusal to answer would prejudice your case considerably in any future proceedings which may arise. Witness. I must still refuse. The coroner. I understand that the cry of cooee was a common signal between you and your father. Witness. It was. The coroner. How was it then that he uttered it before he saw you and before he even knew that you returned from Bristol? Witness, with considerable confusion. I do not know. A juryman. Did you see nothing which aroused your suspicion when you returned on hearing the cry and found your father fatally injured? Witness. Nothing definite. The coroner. What do you mean? Witness. I was so disturbed and excited as I rushed out into the open that I could not think of nothing except my father. Yet I have a vague impression that as I ran forward, something lay upon the ground to the left of me. It seemed to be something grey in colour, a coat of some sort, or a plaid perhaps. And when I rose, I looked around for it, but it was gone. Do you mean that it disappeared before you went for help? Yes, it was gone. You cannot say what it was. No, I had a feeling something was there. How far from the body? A dozen yards or so. And how far from the edge of the wood? About the same. Then if it was removed, it was while you were within a dozen yards of it. Yes, but with my back towards it. This concluded the examination of the witness. I see, said I, as I glanced down the column, that the coroner in his concluding remarks was rather severe upon the young McCarthy. He calls attention, and with reason, to the discrepancy about his father having signalled to him before seeing him, also to his refusal to give details of his conversation with his father and his singular account of his father's dying words. They are all, as he remarks, very much against the son. Holmes laughed softly to himself and stretched himself out upon the cushioned seat. Both you and the coroner have been at some pains, he said, to single out the very strongest points in the young man's favour. Don't you see that you alternately give him credit for having too much imagination and too little? Or too little, if he could not invent a cause of the quarrel which would give him the sympathy of the jury, too much if he evolved from his own inner consciousness anything so autre as a dying reference to a rat on the incident of the vanishing cloth. No, sir, I shall approach this case from the point of view that what this young man says is true, and we shall see whither that hypothesis will lead us. And now, here is my pocket Petrarch, and not another word shall I say of this case until we are on the scene of action. We lunch at Swindon, and I see that we shall be there in 20 minutes. Come on now. There we go. It was nearly 4 o'clock when we at last, after passing through the beautiful Stroud Valley, and that's where I lived, Stroud Valley, and over the broad gleaming Severn, found ourselves at the pretty little country town of Ross. A lean, ferret like man, furtive and sly looking, was waiting for us upon the platform. In spite of the light brown dust coat and leather leggings which he wore in deference to his rustic surroundings, I had no difficulty in recognizing Lestrade of Scotland Yard. With him we drove to the Hereford Arms, where a room had already been engaged for us. Uh, I've ordered a carriage, said Lestrade as we sat over a cup of tea. I knew your energetic nature, and that you would not be happy until you had seen the scene of the crime. It is very nice and complimentary of you, Holmes answered. It is entirely a question of barometric pressure. Lestrade looked startled. I do not quite follow, he said. How is the glass? 29? 29, I see. No wind and not a cloud in the sky. I have a case full of cigarettes here which need smoking, and the sofa is very much superior to the usual country hotel abomination. I do not think it is probable that I shall use the carriage tonight. Lestrade laughed indulgently. Oh, you have no doubt already formed your conclusions from the newspapers, he said. The case is as plain as a pikestaff, and the more one goes into it, the plainer it becomes. Still, of course, one can't refuse a lady, and such a very positive one too. She had heard of you, and would have your opinion, but I repeatedly told her there was nothing which you could do which I had not already done. Why, bless my soul, here she is with her carriage at the door. He had hardly spoken before there rushed into the room one of the most lovely young women that I have ever seen in my life. Her violet eyes shining, her lips parted, a pink flush upon her cheeks, all thought of her natural reserve lost in her overpowering excitement and concern. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, she cried, glancing from one to the other of us, and finally, with a woman's quick intuition, fastening upon my companion. I am so glad that you have come. I've driven down to tell you. I know that James didn't do it. I know it. And I want you to start upon your work knowing it too. Never let yourself doubt upon that point. We've known each other since we were little children, and I know his faults as no one else does. But he's too tender-hearted to hurt a fly. Such a charge is absurd to anyone who really knows him. I hope we may be clear. We hope we may clear him, Miss Turner, said Sherlock Holmes. You may rely upon my doing all that I can. But you've read the evidence. You've formed some conclusion. Do you not see some loophole, some flaw? Do you not think yourself that he is innocent? I think that it is very probable. There now, she cried, throwing back her head and looking defiantly at Lestrade. You hear? He gives me hope. Lestrade shrugged his shoulders. I'm afraid that my colleague has been a little quick in forming his conclusions, he said. But he is right. I know that he is right. James never did it. About his quarrel with his father, I'm sure that the reason why he would not speak about it to the coroner was because I was concerned in it. In what way? Asked Holmes. It is no time for me to be hiding anything. James and his father had many disagreements about me. Mr. McCarthy was very anxious that there should be a marriage between us. James and I have always loved each other as a brother and sister, but of course he's young and has seen very little of life yet, and, well, he naturally did not wish to do anything like that yet. So there were quarrels, and this, I'm sure, was one of them. And your father? Asked Holmes. Was he in favour of such a union? No, he was averse to it also. No one but Mr. McCarthy was in favour of it. A quick blush passed over her fresh face as Holmes shot one of his keen, questioning glances at her. Thank you for this information, said he. May I see your father if I call tomorrow? I'm afraid the doctor won't allow it. The doctor? Yes, have you not heard? Poor father has never been strong for years back, but this has broken him down completely. He's taken to his bed, and Dr. Willow says that he is a wreck and that his nervous system is shattered. Mr. McCarthy was the only man alive who'd known Dad in the old days in Victoria. Huh. In Victoria, that is important. Yes, at the mines. Quite so. At the gold mines, where, as I understand, Mr. Turner made his money? Why, yes, certainly. Thank you, Miss Turner. You have been of material assistance to me. You will tell me if you have any news tomorrow. No doubt you will go to the prison to see James. Oh, if you do, Mr. Holmes, do tell him that I know him to be innocent. I will, Miss Turner. I must go home now, for Dad is very ill, and he misses me, so if I leave him. Goodbye, and God help you in your undertaking. She hurried from the room as impulsively as she had entered, and we heard the wheels of her carriage rattle off down the street. I'm ashamed of you, Holmes, said Lestrade with dignity after a few minutes' silence. Why would you raise up hopes of which you are bound to disappoint? I'm not over tender of heart, but I call it cruel. I think that I may see my way to clearing James McCarthy, said Holmes. Have you an order to see him in prison? Yes, but only for you and me. Then I shall reconsider my resolution about going out. We shall have time to take a train to Hereford and see him tonight. Ample. Then let us do so. Watson, I fear that you will find it very slow, but I shall only be away a couple of hours. Thank you, Ziggy Wiggy. I walked down to the station with them, and then wandered through the streets of the little town, finally returning to the hotel, where I lay upon the sofa and tried to interest myself in a yellow-backed novel. The puny plot of the story was so thin, however, when compared to the deep mystery through which we were groping, and I found my attention wander so constantly from the fiction to the fact, that I at last flung it across the room and gave myself up entirely to the consideration of the events of the day. Supposing that this unhappy young man's story was absolutely true, then what hellish thing, what absolutely unforeseen and extraordinary calamity could have occurred between the time when he parted from his father and the moment when, drawn back by his screams, he rushed into the glade? It was something terrible and deadly. What could it be? Might not the nature of the injuries reveal something to my medical instincts? I rang the bell and called for the weekly country paper, which contained a verbatim account of the inquest. In the surgeon's deposition, it was stated that the posterior third of the left parietal bone and the left half of the occipital bone had been shattered by a heavy blow from a blunt weapon. I marked the spot upon my own head. Clearly, such a blow must have been struck from behind. That was to some extent in the favour of the accused, as when seen quarrelling, he was face to face with his father. Still, it did not go for very much, for the older man might have turned his back before the blow fell. Still, it might be worth while to call Holmes' attention to it. Then there was the peculiar dying reference to a rat. What could that mean? It could not be delirium. A man dying from a sudden blow does not commonly become delirious. No, it was more likely to be an attempt to explain how he met his fate. What could it indicate? I cudgelled my brains to find some possible explanation. And then the incident of the grey cloth seen by young McCarthy. If that were true, the murderer must have dropped some part of his dress, presumably his overcoat in his flight, and must have seen the hardihood to return and carry it away at the instant when the son was kneeling with his back turned not a dozen paces away. What a tissue of mysteries and improbabilities the whole thing was! I did not wonder at Lestrade's opinion, and yet I had so much faith in Sherlock Holmes's insight that I could not lose hope as long as every fresh fact seemed to strengthen his conviction of young McCarthy's innocence. It was late before Sherlock Holmes returned. He came back alone, for Lestrade was staying in lodgings in the town. The glass still keeps very high, he remarked as he sat down. It is of importance that it should not rain before we are able to go over the ground. On the other hand, a man should be at his very best and keenest for such nice work as that, and I do not wish to do it when fagged by a long journey. I've seen young McCarthy. And what did you learn from him? Nothing. Could he throw no light? None at all. I was inclined to think at one time that he knew who had done it and was screening him for her, but I'm convinced now that he is as puzzled as everyone else. He's not a very quick-witted youth, though comely to look at, and I should think sound at heart. I cannot admire his taste, I remarked, if it is indeed a fact that he was adverse to a marriage with so charming a young lady as this Miss Turner. Ah, thereby hangs a rather painful tale. This fellow is madly, insanely in love with her, but some 2 years ago, when he was only a lad, and before he really knew her, for she'd been away 5 years at boarding school, what does the idiot do but get into the clutches of a barmaid in Bristol and marry her at a registry office? No one knows a word of the matter, but you can imagine how maddening it must be to him to be upbraided for not doing what he would give his very eyes to do, but what he knows to be absolutely impossible. It was a sheer frenzy of this sort which made him throw his hands up into the air when his father, at their last interview, was goading him to propose to Miss Turner. On the other hand, he had no means of supporting himself, and his father, who was by all accounts a very hard man, would have thrown him over utterly had he known the truth. It was with this barmaid wife that he had spent the last 3 days in Bristol, and his father did not know where he was. Mark that point. It is very important. It is of importance. Good has come out of evil, however. The barmaid, finding from the papers that he is in serious trouble and likely to be hanged, has thrown him over utterly and has written to him to say that she has a husband already in the Bermuda dockyard, so that there really is no tie between them. I think that that bit of news has consoled young McCarthy for all that he has suffered. But he is innocent. But if he is innocent, who has done it? Ah, who? I would call your attention very particularly to 2 points. One is that the murdered man had an appointment with someone at the pool, and that the someone could not have been his son, for his son was away, and he did not know when he would return. The second is that the murdered man was heard to cry "Cooey" before he knew that his son had returned. These are the crucial points upon which the case depends. Now, let us talk about George Meredith, if you please, and we shall leave minor points until tomorrow. There was no rain, as Holmes had foretold, and the morning broke bright and cloudless. At 9 o'clock, Lestrade called for us with the carriage, and we set off for Hatherley Farm on the Boscombe Pool. "There's no serious news this morning," Lestrade observed. "It is said that Mr. Turner of the Hall is so ill that his life is despaired of." "Well, there is serious news this morning." "An elderly man, I presume?" said Holmes. "About 60, but his constitution has been shattered by his life abroad, and he's been failing health for some time. This business has had a very bad effect upon him. He's an old friend of McCarthy's, and, I may add, a great benefactor to him, for I've learned that he gave him Hatherley Farm rent-free." "Indeed, that is interesting." "Oh, yes. In 100 other ways he has helped him. Everybody about here speaks of his kindness to him." "Really? Does it not strike you as a little singular that this McCarthy appears to have had a little of his own, and to have had under such obligations to Turner, should still talk of marrying his son to Turner's daughter, who is presumably heiress to the estate, and then in such a very cocksure manner, as if it was merely a case of a proposal and all else would follow? It is the more strange since we know that Turner himself was averse to the idea. The daughter told us as much. Do you not deduce something from that?" "Well, we've got to get to the deductions and inferences," said Lestrade, winking at me. "I find it hard enough to tackle facts, Holmes, without flying away after theories and fancies." "You are right," said Holmes demurely. "You do find it very hard to tackle the facts. Anyhow, I have grasped one fact which you seem to be difficult to get hold of," replied Lestrade with some warmth. "And that is?" "That McCarthy senior met his death from McCarthy junior, and that all theories to the contrary are the merest moonshine." "Well, moonshine is a brighter thing than fog," said Holmes, laughing. "But I am very much mistaken if this is not Hatherley Farm upon the left." "Yes, it is." It was a widespread, comfortable-looking building, two-storied, slate roof with great yellow blotches of lichen upon the grey walls. The drawn blinds and the smokeless chimneys, however, gave it a stricken look, as though the weight of this horror still lay heavy upon it. We called at the door when the maid, at Holmes's request, showed us the boots which her master wore at the time of his death, and also a pair of his sons, though not the pair which he had had then. Having measured these very carefully from 7 or 8 different points, Holmes desired to be led to the courtyard, from which we all followed the winding track which led to Boscombe Pool. Holmes was transferred when he was hot upon such a scent as this. Men who had only known the quiet thinker and logician of Baker Street would have failed to recognize him. His face flushed and darkened. His brows were drawn into 2 hard black lines, while his eyes shone out from beneath them with a steely glitter. His face was bent downwards, his shoulders bowed, his lips compressed, and the veins stood out like whipcord in his long, sinewy neck. His nostrils seemed to dilate with a purely animal lust for the chase, and his mind was so absolutely concentrated upon the matter before him that a question or a remark fell unheeded upon his ears, or at the most only provoked a quick, impatient snarl in reply. Swiftly and silently he made his way along the track which ran through the meadows, and so by way of the woods to the Boscombe Pool. It was damp, marshy ground, as is all that district, and there were marks of many feet both upon the path and amid the short grass which bounded on either side. Sometimes Holmes would hurry on, sometimes stop dead, and once he made quite a little detour into the meadow. Lestrade and I walked behind him, the detective indifferent and contemptuous, while I watched my friend with the interest which sprang from the conviction that every one of his actions was directed towards a definite end. The Boscombe Pool, which is a reed-girt sheet of water some 50 yards across, is situated at the boundary between Mr. Hatherley Farm and the private park of the wealthy Mr. Turner. Upon the woods which lined it upon the further side, we could see the red jutting pinnacles which marked the site of the rich landowner's dwelling. On the Hatherley side of the pool the woods grew very thick, and there was a narrow belt of sodden grass 20 paces across between the edge of the trees and the reeds which lined the lake. Lestrade showed us the exact spot at which the body had been found, and indeed so moist was the ground that I could plainly see the traces which had been left by the fall of the stricken man. To Holmes, as I could see by his eager face and peering eyes, very many other things were to be read upon the trampled grass. He ran round like a dog who is picking up a scent, and then turned upon my companion. "What did you go into the pool for?" he asked. "I fished about with a rake. I thought that there might be some weapon or other trace, but how on earth—" "Oh, tut, tut, I've no time. That left foot of yours with that inward twist is all over the place. A mole could trace it, and there it vanishes among the reeds. Oh, but how simple it all would have been if I'd been here before they came like a herd of buffalo and wallowed all over it. Here is where the party with the lodge-keeper came, and they have covered all tracks for 6 or 8 feet around the body. But here are 3 separate tracks of the same feet." He drew out a lens, and lay upon his waterproof to have a better view, talking all the time rather to himself than to us. "These are young McCarthy's feet. Twice he was walking, and once he ran so swiftly that the soles are deeply marked, and the heels hardly visible. That bears out the story. He ran when he saw his father on the ground. Then here are the father's feet as he paced up and down. What is this, then? Is this the butt end of the gun as the son stood listening? And this? Ha ha! What have we here? Tiptoes. Tiptoes, square too, quite unusual boots. They come, they go, they come again. Of course, that was for the cloak. Now, where did they come from?" He ran up and down, sometimes losing, sometimes finding the track, until we were very well within the edge of the wood and under the shadow of a great beech, the largest tree in the neighbourhood. Holmes traced his way to the farther side of this, and lay down once more upon his face with a little cry of satisfaction. For a long time he remained there, turning over the leaves and dried sticks, gathering up what seemed to me to be dust into an envelope, and examining it with his lens, not only the ground, but even the bark of the tree as far as he could reach. A jagged stone was lying among the moss, and this he also carefully examined and retained. Then he followed a pathway through the wood until he came to the high road, where all traces were lost. Hmm, it has been a case of a considerable interest, he remarked, returning to his natural manner. I fancy that this grey house on the right must be the lodge. I think that I will go and have a word with Moran, or perhaps write a little note. Having done that, we may drive back to our luncheon. You may walk to the cab, and I shall be with you presently. It was about 10 minutes before we regained our cab and drove back into Ross, Holmes still carrying with him the stone which he had picked up in the wood. This may interest you, Lestrade, he remarked, holding it out. The murder was done with it. I see no marks. Well, there are none. How do you know, then? The grass was growing under it. It had only lain there a few days. There was no sign of a place where it once had been taken. It corresponds with the injuries. There is no sign of any other weapon. And the murderer? He is a tall man, left-handed, limps with the right leg, wears thick-soled shooting boots and a grey cloak, smokes Indian cigars, uses a cigar holder, and carries a blunt penknife in his pocket. There are several other indications, but these may be enough to aid us in our search. Lestrade laughed. I'm afraid that I'm still a skeptic, he said. Theories are all very well, but we have to deal with the hard-headed British jury. Nous verrons, answered Holmes calmly. You work your own method, and I shall work mine. I shall be busy this afternoon, and shall probably return to London by the evening train. And leave your case unfinished? No, finished. But the mystery? It is solved. Who was the criminal, then? The gentleman I described. But who is he? Well, surely it would not be difficult to find out. This is not such a populous neighbourhood. Lestrade shrugged his shoulders. I'm a practical man, he said. I really cannot undertake to go about the country looking for a left-handed gentleman with a game leg. I should become the laughing stock of Scotland Yard. All right, said Holmes quietly. I have given you the chance. Here are your lodgings. Goodbye. I shall drop you a line before I leave. Having left Lestrade at his rooms, we drove to our hotel, where we found lunch upon the table. Holmes was silent and buried in thought, with a pained expression upon his face, as one who finds himself in a perplexing position. Look here, Watson, he said when the cloth was cleared. Just sit down in this chair and let me preach to you for a little. I don't know quite what to do. I should value your advice. Light a cigar and let me expound. Well, pray do so. Well, now, in considering this case, there are 2 points about young McCarthy's narrative which struck us both instantly, although they impressed me in his favour and you against him. One was the fact that his father should, according to his account, cry "cooey" before seeing him. The other was his singular dying reference to a rat. He mumbled several words, you understand, but that was all that caught the son's ear. Now, from this double point, our research must commence, and we will begin it by presuming then that what the lad says is absolutely true. Well, what of this cooee then? Well, obviously, it could not have been meant for the son. The son, as far as he knew, was in Bristol. It was mere chance that he was within earshot. The cooee was meant to attract the attention of whoever it was that he had the appointment with. But cooey is a distinctly Australian cry, one which is used between Australians. There is a strong presumption that the person whom McCarthy was expected to meet at Boscombe Pool was someone who had been in Australia. Well, what of the rat then? Sherlock Holmes took a folded paper from his pocket and flattened it out on the table. This is a map of the colony of Victoria, he said. I wired to Bristol for it last night. He put his hand over part of the map. What do you read? He asked. Arat, I read. And now? He raised his hand. Ballarat. Quite so. That was the word the man uttered, and of which his son only caught the last two syllables. He was trying to utter the name of his murderer, so and so of Ballarat. It is wonderful, I exclaimed. It is obvious. And now, you see, I had narrowed the field down considerably. The possession of a grey garment was a third point, which, granting the son's statement to be correct, was a certainty. We've come now out of mere vagueness to the definite conception of an Australian from Ballarat with a grey cloak. Well, certainly. And one who was at home in the district, for the pool can only be approached by the farm or by the estate, where strangers would hardly wander. Well, quite so. Then comes our expedition of today. By an examination of the ground, I gained the trifling details which I gave to that imbecile Lestrade as to the personality of the criminal. But how did you gain them? You know my method. It is founded upon the observance of trifles. His height, his height I know that you might roughly judge from the length of his stride. His boots, too, might be told from their traces. Yes, they were peculiar boots. But his lameness, the impression of his right foot was always less distinct than his left. He put less weight upon it. Why? Because he limped. He was lame. But his left-handedness, you were yourself struck by the nature of the injury as recorded by the surgeon of the inquest. The blow was struck from immediately behind, and yet was upon the left side. Now, how can that be unless it were by a left-handed man? He had stood behind that tree during the interview between the father and the son. He'd even smoked there. I found the ash of a cigar, with my own special knowledge of tobacco ashes, enabled me to pronounce as an Indian cigar. I have, as you know, devoted some attention to this and written a little monograph on the ashes of 140 different varieties of pipe, cigar, and cigarette tobacco. Having found the ash, I then looked around and discovered the stump among the moss where he had tossed it. It was an Indian cigar of the variety which are rolled in Rotterdam, and the cigar holder, I could see that the end had not been in his mouth. Therefore, he used a holder. The tip had been cut off, not bitten off, but the cut was not a clean one, so I deduced a blunt penknife. Holmes, I said, you have drawn a net around this man from which he cannot escape, and you have saved an innocent human life as truly as if you had cut the cord which he was hanging from him. I see the direction in which all this points. The culprit is Mr. John Turner, cried the hotel waiter, opening the door of our sitting room, ushering in a visitor. The man who entered was a strange and impressive figure. His slow, limping step and bowed shoulders gave the appearance of decrepitude, yet his hard, deep-lined, craggy features and his enormous limbs showed that he was possessed of unusual strength of body and of character. His tangled beard, grizzled hair, and outstanding drooping eyebrows combined to give an air of dignity and power to his appearance. But his face was of an ashen white, while his lips and the corner of his nostrils were tinged with a shade of blue. It was clear to me that at a glance he was in the grip of some deadly and chronic disease. Pray, sit down on the sofa, said Holmes gently. You had my note? Yes, the lodge keeper brought it up. You said that you wished to see me here to avoid scandal. I thought people would talk if I went to the hall. Why did you wish to see me? He looked across at my companion with despair in his weary eyes, as though his questions were already answered. Yes, said Holmes, answering the look rather than the words. It is so. I know all about McCarthy. The old man sank his face in his hands. But God help me, he cried, for I'd not have let the young man come to harm. If I give you my word that I've spoken out of it against, I give you my word that I would have spoken out if it went against him at the assizes. I'm glad to hear you say so, said Holmes gravely. I would have spoken now, had it not been for my dear girl. You've broken her heart, and will break her when she hears that I'm arrested. It may not come to that, said Holmes. What? I am no official agent. I understand that it was your daughter who required my presence here, and I'm acting in her interests. Young McCarthy must be got off, however. I'm a dying man, said Turner. I've had diabetes for years. My doctors say it is a question whether I shall live a month, but I would rather die under my own roof than in a jail. Holmes rose and sat down at the table with his pen in his hand and a bundle of paper before him. Just tell us the truth, he said. I shall jot down the facts, you will sign it, and Watson here can witness it. then I could produce your confession at the last extremity to save young McCarthy. I promise you that I shall not use it unless it is absolutely needed." He says, "Well," says the old man, "it's a question whether I shall live to the assizes, so it matters little to me, but I should wish to spare Alice the shock. And now I will make a thing clear to you. It's been a long time on the acting, but it will not take me long to tell. You didn't know this dead man, McCarthy. He was a devil incarnate, I tell you that. God keep you out of the clutches of such a man as he. His grip had been upon me these 20 years, and he has blasted my life. And I'll tell you first how I came to be in his power. It was in the early 60s at the diggings. I was a young chap then, hot-blooded and reckless, ready to turn my hand to anything. I got among bad companions, took to drink, had no luck with my claim, took to the bush, and in a word became what we would call over here a highway robber. There were 6 of us, and we had a wild, free life of it, sticking up a station from time to time, or stopping the wagons on the road to the diggings. Black Jack of Ballarat was the name I went under, and our party is still remembered in the colony as the Ballarat Gang. One day, a gold convoy came down from Ballarat to Melbourne, and we lay in wait for it and attacked it. There were 6 troopers, and there were 6 of us, so it was a close thing, but we emptied 4 of their saddles at the first volley. 3 of our boys were killed, however, before we got the swag. I put my pistol to the head of the wagon driver, who was this very man McCarthy. I wished to the Lord that I had shot him then, but I spared him. I saw his wicked little eyes fixed on my face as though to remember every feature. We got away with the gold, became wealthy men, and made our way over to England without being suspected. There I parted from my old friends and determined to settle down to a quiet and respectable life. I bought this estate, which chanced to be in the market, and I set myself to do a little work good with the money to make up for the way which I had earned it. I married too, though my wife died young. She left with my dear little Alice. Even when she was just a wee baby, her wee hands seemed to lead me down the right path as nothing else has ever done. In a word, I turned over a new leaf and did my best to make up for the past. All was going well when McCarthy laid his grip upon me. I'd gone up to town about an investment, and I met him in a Regent Street with hardly a coat to his back or a boot to his foot. "Here you are, Jack," he says. "Here we are," he says, touching me on the arm. "We'll be good as family to you. There's 2 of us, me and my son, and you can have the keeping of us. If you don't, it's a fine law-abiding country, is England, and there's always a policeman within hail." Well, down they came to the West Country. There was no shaking them off, and now they live rent-free on my best land ever since. There was no rest for me, no peace, no forgetfulness. Turn where I would, there was this cunning, grinning face at my elbow. It grew worse as Alice grew up, for he soon saw I was afraid of her knowing my past, more afraid of her knowing my past than of the police. Whatever he wanted, he must have, and whatever it was, I gave him without question. Land, money, houses, until at least he asked for a thing which I could not give. He asked for Alice. His son, you see, had grown up, and so had my girl. As I was known to be in weak health, it seemed a fine stroke to him that his lad should step into the whole property. But there I was firm. I would not have his cursed stock mixed with mine. Not that I had any dislike to the lad, but his blood was in him, and that was enough. I stood firm. McCarthy threatened. I braved him to do his worst. We were to meet at the pool midway between our houses to talk it over. And when I went down there, I found him talking with his son, so I smoked a cigar and waited behind a tree until he should be alone. But as I listened to his talk, all that was black and bitter in me seemed to come uppermost. He was urging his son to marry my daughter with as little regard for what she might think as if she were a slut off the streets. It drove me mad to think of that, and all that I held most dear should be in the power of such a man as this. Could I not snap the bond? Was I already dying, desperate man? Though clear of mind and fairly strong of ling, I knew that my fate was sealed, that my memory and my girl both could be saved, if I could not but silence that foul tongue. I did it, Mr. Holmes. I would do it again. Deeply as I have sinned, I have led a life of martyrdom to atone for. But that girl of mine should be entangled in the same meshes which held me was more than I could suffer. I struck him down with no more compunction than if he had been some foul and venomous beast. His cry brought back his son, but I gained the cover of the wood, though I was forced to go back to fetch the cloak which I dropped in my flight. That is the true story, gentlemen, of all that occurred. Well, it is not for me to judge you, said Holmes, as the old man signed the statement which had been drawn out. I pray that we may never be exposed to such a temptation. I pray not, sir. And what do you intend to do? In view of your health, nothing. You are yourself aware that you will soon have to answer for your deed at a higher court than the assizes. I will keep your confession, and if McCarthy is condemned, I will be forced to use it. If not, it should never be seen by mortal eye, and your secret, whether you be alive or dead, shall be safe with us. Farewell, then, said the old man solemnly. Your own deathbeds, when they come, will be the easier for the thought of the peace which you have given to mine. Tottering and shaking in all his giant frame, he stumbled slowly from the room. God help us, said Holmes after a long silence. Why does fate play such tricks with the poor helpless worms? I never hear of such a case as this. I do not think of Baxter's words and say, there, but for the grace of God, goes Sherlock Holmes. James McCarthy was acquitted at the assizes on the strength of the number of objections which had been drawn out by Holmes and submitted to the defending counsel. Old Turner lived for 7 months after our interview, but he is now dead, and there is every prospect that the son and the daughter may come to live happily together in ignorance of the black cloud which rests upon their pasts. Snuck in a little bit of an Australian hint there at the end, eh? 10:20, you say? Well, chat, we definitely won't get through another one. But apparently you don't mind cliffhangers. Someone was saying last week. So, in that case, we shall dive straight into the second one. But let's have a little chit chat because I need to wet the whistle. A BBC Radio Sherlock cliffhanger. Sorry, Bublina. I think there's too many people saying that they don't mind a bit of what do you call it? Hey, what's been going on while I've been um with y'all chat? Hype train. Oh, that was yesterday. Kermit, Summers, Ziggy Stoggers, Evil Ellie, Colmus Varvas. Um, thanks for the subs and the follows. You're very kind. I'm cleaning because I have family coming out for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, Glastonbury. What is he doing in Glastonbury, Luigi? Cool. Actually, I do something. I do something similar. My friend who's got Danish family. That's the opposite of cliffhanger. Absolutely jolly him. Thank you, Mr. Fact. Um, yeah, why? I have a different wood cry. My friend from stable hand and worked in a few restaurants. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I was up in Gloucestershire. Look, see that Stroud mentioned in the story, Stroud Valley. It's very beautiful, actually. You come in on the train through a village called Chalford, and it just runs through and Stroud and the Five Valleys. They're not working anymore, but during the time that the the story is set, it would have had something like 320 plus working mills off the streams that leads through to the Frome. Frome is the main river. You did the hood I knitted. Your ex had family up in Stroud way? No way. Was they posh by any chance? Well, did they speak like this, Luigi? What kind of locals from Stroud were they? I say, where are you from? You work in a restaurant, do you? Well, that's jolly nice for you. Anyway, what was I going to say? Can't remember. Something else. Stories. Gloucestershire. Uh, oh, no, I even lost. All right, let's dive in for another little bit of story because I don't want to. Most sarcastic, jolly nice. If you've met Hooray Henrys, you'll know what I'm talking about. They sound like a farmer of fuzzes. I right to the proper locals then, right? They're talking like that the whole time. Oh, you easy? Where are you from, then? You work in a restaurant? Is it down in the pub on the Haven there? That's the other thing, isn't it? Yarp, yarp. That farmer. Yarp, yarp. That's really strong, close to a strong Appalachian accent. Well, actually, the theory is the Appalachian Southern accent comes from the West Country. That's because I was mainly mumbling there, Luigi. You know, I was like, "All right, gonna go over there." So it's packed down in the back of the house. So I'm just mumbling. I'm just mumbling. I'm just making shit up. I'm trying to get the initiation ceremony to involve Kate Bush somehow, but we'll see. Kate, yeah, but Kate Bush isn't from Yorkshire. She's from Essex. There are lots of Scots, Irish, and the Appalachians. Yeah, Churchill's egg. No, it's fine. Don't worry. I wasn't actually saying anything coherent. But here's something that you might hear in Bath. Oh, he's gone and got her in there where he can't get her out again, isn't it? He's gone and got her in there where he can't get her out again. He's gone and got her in there where he can't get her out again. You basically have the Norwegian equivalent of the West Country accent. Uh, do you do that often, speaking without saying anything? Yeah, of course. I'm an improviser. I make shit up all the time. You know, what are you going to do about it, Bublina? Nothing. Um, you can't get her out there where you can't get her out again. You can't. He's gone and got her in there. He's gone and parked that car into a very tight spot where it'd be quite difficult to get it out again. He's an actor, he gets paid to lie. No, I get paid to tell an emotional truth. It's not necessarily mine. I interpret words, I channel energy. Different from lying. Because the truth, unless the character's lying. It's because I'm from Boston and following that accent when people are drunk is similar. What's the truth I'm telling right now? I'm telling the truth of Sherlock Holmes. I'm not yawning. Park the car in a Harvard yard. How many lanyards per line? Okay, children. I know I've done well, haven't I? Book sniffer. I wouldn't yawn. All right, I've put off 4 viewers there in the interim. I'll just get reading, shall I? The 5 orange pips. When I glance over my notes and records of the Sherlock Holmes cases between the years 82 and 90, I'm faced by so many which present strange and interesting features that it is no easy matter to know which to choose and which to leave. Some, however, have already gained publicity through the papers, and others have not offered a field for those peculiar qualities which my friend possessed in so high a degree, and which it is the object of these papers to illustrate. Some, too, have baffled his analytical skill and would be, as narratives, beginnings without endings, while others have been but partially cleared up and have their explanations founded rather than upon a conjecture and surmise than on an absolute logical proof which was so dear to him. There is, however, one of these last which was so remarkable in its detail and so startling in its results that I am tempted to give some account of it in spite of the fact that there are points in connection with it which never have been and probably never will be entirely cleared up. The year 1887 furnished us with a long series of cases of greater or lesser interest, and of which I retain the records. Among the headings under this one 12 months, I find an account of the adventure of the Parador Chamber, of the Amateur Mendicant Society, who had a luxurious club in the lower vault of a furniture warehouse, of the facts connected with the loss of the British bark Sophie Anderson, of the singular adventures of Grice Patterson's in the island of Ufa, and finally of the Camberwell poisoning case. In the latter, as may be remembered, Sherlock Holmes was able, by winding up the dead man's watch, to prove that it had been wound up 2 hours ago, and that therefore the deceased had gone to bed within that time, a deduction which was of the greatest importance in clearing up the case. All these I may sketch out at some future date, but none of them present such singular features as the strange train of circumstances which I have now taken upon my pen to describe. It was in the latter days of September, and the equinoctial gales had set in with exceptional violence. All day the wind had screamed and the rain had beaten against the windows, so that even here in the heart of great handmade London we were forced to raise our minds for the instant from the routine of life and to recognize the presence of those great elemental forces which shriek at mankind through the bars of his civilization like untamed beasts in a cage. As evening drew in, the storm grew louder and louder, and the wind cried and sobbed like a child in the chimney. Sherlock Holmes sat moodily at one side of the fireplace, cross-indexing his records of crime, whilst I, at the other, was deep in one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories, until the howl of the gale from without seemed to blend with the text and the splash of the rain to lengthen out into the long squash of the sea waves. My wife was on a visit to her aunt's, and for a few days I was a dweller once more in my old quarters at Baker Street. "Why," said I, glancing at my companion, "that was surely the bell. Who should come tonight? Some friend of yours, perhaps?" "Except yourself, I have none," he answered. "I do not encourage visitors." "A client, then?" "If so, it is a very serious case. Nothing else would bring a man out on such a day and at such an hour, but I take it that it is more likely to be some crony of the landlady's." Sherlock Holmes was wrong in his conjecture, however, and there came a step in the passageway and a tapping at the door. He stretched out his long arm to turn the lamp away from himself and towards the vacant chair upon which a newcomer must sit. "Come in," he said. The man who entered was young, some 2 and 20 at outside, well groomed and trimly clad, with something of refinement and delicacy in his bearing. The streaming umbrella which he held in his hand, and his long shining waterproof, told of the fierce weather through which he had come. He looked about him anxiously in the glare of the lamp, and I could see that his face was pale and his eyes heavy, like those of a man who is weighed down with some great anxiety. I owe you an apology, he said, raising his golden pince nez to his eyes. I trust that I'm not intruding. I fear that I've brought some traces of the storm and the rain into your snug chamber. Give me your coat and umbrella, said Holmes. They may rust here on the hook and will dry presently. You've come up from the southwest, I see. Yes, from Horsham. That clay and chalk mixture which I see upon your toe caps is quite distinctive. I've come for advice. That is easily got. And help. That is not always so easy. I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. I heard from Major Prendergast how you saved him in the Tankerville Club scandal. Ah, of course. He was wrongfully accused of cheating at cards. He said that you could solve anything. He said too much. That you are never beaten. I've been beaten 4 times, 3 times by men, and once by a woman. But what is that compared with the number of your successes? It is true that I've been generally successful. Then you may be so with me. I beg. What? It is true that I've been generally successful. Then you may be so with me. I beg that you will draw your chair up to the fire and favour me with some details as to your case. It is no ordinary one. None of those which come to me are. I'm the last court of appeal. And yet I question, sir, whether in all your experience you've ever listened to a more mysterious and inexplicable chain of events than those which have happened in my own family. You fill me with interest, said Holmes. Pray give us the essential facts from the commencement, and I can afterwards question you as to those details which seem to me to be the most important. The young man pulled his chair up and brushed his wet feet out towards the blaze. My name, he said, is John Openshaw, but my own affairs have, so far as I can understand it, little to do with this awful business. It is a hereditary matter, so in order to give you an idea of the facts, I must go back to the commencement of the affair. You must know that my grandfather had 2 sons, my uncle Elias and my father Joseph. My father had a small factory at Coventry, which he enlarged at the time of the invention of bicycling. He was the patentee of the Openshaw unbreakable tyre, and his business met with such success that he was able to sell it and to retire upon a handsome competence. My uncle Elias emigrated to America when he was a young man and became a planter in Florida, where he was reported to have done very well. At the time of the war, he fought in Jackson's army, and afterwards under Hood, where he was close to be a colonel. When Lee laid down his arms, my uncle returned to his plantation, where he remained for 3 or 4 years. About 1869 or 1870, he came back to Europe and took a small estate in Sussex near Horsham. He had made a very considerable fortune in the States, and his reason for leaving them was his aversion to the Negroes and his dislike of the Republican policy in extending the franchise to them. He was a singular man, fierce and quick tempered, very foul mouthed when he was angry, and of a most retiring disposition. During all the years that he lived in Horsham, I doubt if he ever set foot in town. He had a garden and 2 or 3 fields round his house, and there he would take his exercise, though very often for weeks on end he would never leave his room. He drank a great deal of brandy and smoked very heavily, but he would see no society and did not want any friends, not even his own brother. He didn't mind me. In fact, he took a fancy to me the last time, for the time when for at the time when he saw me first, I was a youngster of 12 or so. That would be in the year 1878, after he had been 8 or 9 years in England. He begged my father to let me live with him, and he was very kind to me in his way. When he was sober, he used to be fond of playing backgammon and draughts with me, and he would make me his representative both with the servants and with the tradespeople, so that by the time I was 16, I was quite master of the house. I kept all of the keys and could go where I liked and do what I liked, so as long as I did not disturb him in his privacy. There was one singular exception, however, for he had a single room, a lumber room up among the attic, which was invariably locked, and which he would neither permit me nor anyone else to enter. With a boy's curiosity, I've peeped through the keyhole, but I was never able to see more than such a collection of old trunks and bundles as would be expected in such a room. One day, it was in March 1883, a letter with a foreign stamp lay upon the table in front of the Colonel's plate. It was not a common thing for him to receive letters, for his bills were all paid in ready money, and he had no friends of any sort. "From India," he said as he took it up. "Pondicherry postmark, what can it be?" Opening it hurriedly, out there jumped 5 little dried orange pips, which pattered down upon his plate. I began to laugh at this, but the laughter struck from my lips at the sight of his face. His lip had fallen, his eyes were protruding, his skin the colour of putty, and he glared at the envelope which he still held in his trembling hand. "KKK!" he shrieked, and then, my God, my sins have overtaken me." "What is it then, uncle?" I cried. "Death," he said, and rising from the table he retired to his room, leaving me palpitating with horror. I took up the envelope and saw scrawled in red ink upon the inner flap, just above the gum, the letter K 3 times repeated. There was nothing else save the 5 dried pips. What could be the reason of his overpowering terror? I left the breakfast table, and as I ascended the stairs, I met him coming down with an old rusty key, must have belonged to the attic, in one hand and a small brass box like a cash box in the other. "They may do what they like, but I will checkmate them still," he said with an oath. "Tell Mary I shall want a fire in my room today and send down to Fordham, the Horsham lawyer." I did as he ordered, and when the lawyer arrived, I was asked to step up to the room. The fire was burning brightly, and in the grate there was a mass of black, fluffy ashes as of burned paper, while the brass box stood open and empty beside it. As I glanced at the box, I noticed with a start that upon the lid were printed the troubled KKK which I had read in the morning upon the envelope. "I wish you, John," said my uncle, "to witness my will. I leave my estate with all its advantages and all its disadvantages to my brother your father, whence it will no doubt descend to you. If you can enjoy it in peace, well and good. If you cannot, take my advice, boy, and leave it to your deadliest enemy. I'm sorry to give you such a two-edged thing, but I can't say what turn things are going to take. Kindly sign the paper where Mr. Fordham shows you." I signed the paper as directed, and the lawyer took it away with him. The singular incident made, as you may think, the deepest impression upon me, and I pondered over it and turned it every way in my mind without being able to make anything of it. Yet I could not shake off the vague feeling of dread which it left behind it, though the sensation grew less keen as the weeks passed and nothing happened to disturb the usual routine of our lives. I could see a change in my uncle, however. He drank more than ever, and he was less inclined for any sort of society. Most of the time he would spend in his room with the door locked upon the inside, but sometimes he would reemerge in a sort of drunken frenzy and would burst out of the house and tear about the garden with a revolver in his hand, screaming out that he was afraid of no man, and that he was not to be cooped up like a sheep in a pen by man or devil. When these hot fits were over, however, he would rush tumultuously in at the door and lock and bar it behind him, like a man who'd brazen it out no longer against the terror which lies at the roots of his soul. At such times, I have seen his face, even on a cold day, glisten with moisture as though it were new raised from a basin. Well, to come to an end of the matter, Mr. Holmes, and not to abuse your patience, there came a night when he made one of those drunken sallies from which he never came back. We found him, when we went to search for him, face downwards in a little green scummed pool which lay at the foot of the garden. There was no sign of any violence, and the water was but 2 feet deep, so that the jury, having regard to his own eccentricity, brought in a verdict of suicide. But I, who knew how he winced from the very thought of death, had much ado to persuade myself that he'd gone out of his way to meet it. The matter passed, however, and my father entered into the possession of the estate and of some £14,000 which lay to his credit at the bank. And there we shall leave it. Um, Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And thanks for all that, also not only for your chat, but also Jolly Han, I've uploaded them. They've not been approved. I don't know why. The horse ones that you can use already, I put up at the same. I put them all up. Yours went up, Jolly Han. The leak one got approved today, so I don't know why they're taking their time about it. Yeah, the horse ones got approved the day after. Ooh. But leak one is double. What? Fire one? Every Wednesday, Luigi. Same time. Well, I'll have a look then. I don't know what's going on. Also, for some reason, OBS has lost my be back soon thing. It's corrupted. So who the freak knows? But there it is. Leaky, leaky. Double Dadzig Miku. Oh, so that one's up as well. All right, cool. Ooh. Oh dear, it is time for bed now. I can hear the crickets chirruping. Evidently, the gecko didn't eat all of them yet. Blue hair would look nice on me. Would it? Epitaph on X. Only 2 yawns today. I know. I'm very proud of myself. I think that the chair change was quite helpful. Blue mustache. Wow. Okay, that really could be quite interesting. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. That counted as 4 yawns in one go. Are you sure? Like Dario in Game of Thrones. Hang on, I'm losing the thread here. Book of Thrones. Really? Dario? What blue mustache? Who's Dario? I don't remember a blue mustache. Who the frick was Dario? Oh, in the book he had a blue mustache. All right. Obviously, thought it was too strange to have in a bloody thing. Oh, jeez. Okay, that's 5 now. And I think on that note, we should probably say good night. Thank you for your cheers and bits and bobs, and good night. And actually, for those of you who can, see you tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening. I'm going to be streaming with the Hillier, aren't I? We're going to do Goat Chaos with Mark Cram and Logan tomorrow morning. And then in the evening, Logan and I, we're going to be doing a test run with Hot Dog Henry. It's going to be my first foray into KCD, people. Am I going to feed Mark again? No, he's going to feed me with his fingers. Well, I'm not the one who set his house on fire. Get Logan to do Marquetta and Michaela with you. That would be fun. What would he be, though? Loretta? Marquetta, Michaela, and Loretta? My own hot dog? No. I'm just going to have a crack at it. Did I get Mark's garden straightened out? Well, we planted out some stuff. But no. He's below and it's unisex. Nah. Loretta. Can you throw Loretta in the bin, please? What kind of bin? The wheelie bin? Yeah, apparently it's a unisex name, but we need to give him Loretta. Triple boomer. I like two boomer garden ladies. Okay, fine. And she has an overgrown garden. Hilarious. Yeah, Loretta has. Okay, 3 men and a goat. Radzig and Scallots all over again. All right, folks. I'm gonna head out. So good night to you all, and rest well wherever you are, and remember to hydrate or something like that.